Happy Lent. Let's try another one. How about Happy Laetare Sunday? That one was stronger. Okay. So this weekend we celebrate Laetare Sunday. Laetare is a word that means to rejoice, and all throughout the universal church, priests will wear this rose-colored vestments on the fourth Sunday of Lent and the third Sunday of Advent. And then there's like this whole long spiel of every priest trying to justify the color that they wear and making a big deal that it's not pink, it's actually rose, and like pretty much doing push-ups throughout the homily just to prove their masculinity. I am totally fine if you call this pink. I do not care. It is, I don't know how much you know of other languages, but the color rose, the word rose or rosa in Spanish and Latin is translated as, hold on, let me think of it, it's pronounced pink. So to say rose is to say pink, so I do not care if you call it pink. You will not get a battle from me. I do wonder, though, why is it that we wear this color, though? Why do we wear rose or pink on the fourth Sunday of Lent? So if we think of what we're ultimately in, we're in Lent, which is moving towards the Triduum, which starts with Holy Thursday, then moves to Good Friday when Jesus dies on the cross, right? When God dies, when the greatest tragedy that could ever face, that we could ever see, is man killing his Creator. We have that on Good Friday. And then just a few days later, we celebrate the greatest conquering of any victory ever, which is that death is no more, and God resurrects. So what we're preparing for is both to recognize suffering in our life, but also that suffering can bring about a greater good, right? The greatest of goods. So we wear red on the day that Jesus dies, and we wear white on the day that he resurrects. And I don't know if you know this, but if you take red and white and you put them together, you get rose. So we wear rose today to remind ourselves of what's to come, both suffering and redemption. So we have the word laetare, which, as I said, means to rejoice. And so when we break down that word re-enjoy, right, to really rejoice is not to say that I have joy at this very moment, but is to say that I'm calling to mind, I'm remembering the joy that I've had before, and I'm calling it to my mind now. So real rejoicing is to say that I recognize that I had a lot of joy at something, and I'm bringing it to the forefront now. That's what it is to rejoice. So I think we should talk about rejoicing this weekend. Let's talk about all the reasons we have to rejoice over this last year. A year ago today, all the churches shut down. A year ago today, you couldn't go to confession. You couldn't go to Mass. A year ago this week, you couldn't go out in public in a lot of places. A year ago this week, I had to deal with my own cousin, who's like a little sister to me. She was supposed to get married in April, and they had to postpone it, and she eventually actually got married outside the church because the church, it was a different diocese, but I don't think our diocese would be largely different in this realm, kind of just abandoned her. And she was hurt by that. From a year ago today, or this week at least, some of your family members are not present with us. Either they're still scared to come out, or they might have passed away. From a year ago this week, we might not have been able to have a real funeral for them. From a year ago this week, you might not have been able to be with them as they were passing. A year ago this week, we didn't get to finish out the end of a sporting season for our youth. Right? Seniors did not get to play their last game. From a year ago this week, we didn't get to have graduations or graduation parties. We've had a lot of suffering this last year. Which is why I think we need to all the more celebrate Laetare Sunday this year, 2021. because we still have a lot of things to rejoice for. I want to share with you this morning my reason for rejoicing, hoping that it prompts you to also remind yourself of the joy that you've had this last year in the midst of all the suffering. I've said it before, I would not, if I could have a choice, I would never get moved to a new assignment in the midst of a pandemic because it becomes very difficult to get to know people. And my normal ways of kind of inviting myself over to people's houses, right, it adds another step to kind of find out, are they even comfortable with that? Right? So it's a very difficult, especially for an extroverted person, to move into a new assignment when the world is shut down. My first cause for rejoice is because God gave me a special gift during that. I moved here in July. And in late August, I found out that for a variety of reasons, the school needed another teacher. And they asked me if I would be willing to do that. And so all first semester, I taught the junior high kids a religion class, which meant for 3.5 hours every day, I was before 60 7th and 8th graders. And because I was before 60 7th or 8th graders, I got to know them and their families. It's very difficult to get to know, especially young people with masks on, because they kind of all look alike, especially in Catholic school where they're all wearing exactly the same thing. I got to know 60 kids, even with a mask on. I largely got to know some of their families through that. Right? Everything was saying that I was going to be unable to have an effect in people's lives, and God gave me this softball. And I'm joyful for it. I know you all better, not perfectly. I still don't know a lot of your names, unfortunately, but I know St. Pius Parish better because last minute I had to step into a classroom. And I really have joy because of it. I'm so grateful that's the case. And I thank the students and the parents for letting me have that role in their kids' lives. I wish I could still be doing it. Thank you for that. I'm grateful that I got to be in the classroom. I got to know people in a way that most priests actually don't get to know people. My second cause for rejoice. They're not at this Mass, but they were at the last Mass. I don't know if you know this. We actually have religious sisters at our parish. They kind of stand out, so maybe you've noticed them. When I was a kid, we had sisters at my home parish, but I actually didn't know they were sisters until they were leaving. They didn't wear a habit. They didn't go by sister. They were just angry, bitter women who worked at the parish. And the first time that they were ever called sister was actually as they were leaving. I gather now many years later that Father was actually kind of, I don't think they probably liked that Father called them sister. Right? But Father said, Sister so-and-so and so-and-so are leaving. They're going home to retire. And I thought, those are sisters? No wonder nobody wants to be sisters anymore. We're so grateful here at St. Pius. We have 5 sisters. We had 6 for the first semester. And they're joyful people. They're happy. They like being religious sisters. They're not bitter. I've also, in just a few years of priesthood, but also seminary, and as a layperson, got to know quite a bit of religious communities and, got to have dinner at convents or be present at different things and got to know a lot of different sisters in a lot of different communities. Not all the communities are as happy as ours is. Right? Sometimes there can actually be great tension in convents. I don't know if you know this, but sometimes women don't get along. Who knew? I didn't know that. But our sisters like each other. It's also the case that if you look at, they do polls on this every year of what are commonalities amongst girls who make their final vows. They also do it actually for guys who get ordained, but they do it for girls who make their final vows. And the number one common thing that they all have as to what was a major thing in their life to become religious sisters was that they got to regularly interact with religious sisters. Our parish becomes far more likely to have our young women be thinking of religious life simply because we have 6 sisters that just go to Mass, regardless of all the other things they do. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for their role in my life. I'm grateful that you all get to see the complementarity between sisters and priests. Right? It's a good thing to see the complementarity between husbands and wives, moms and dads. But I think it's also really good for you to see the complementarity between priests and religious. Right? When they call me in the middle of the night for something I can't do, but I feel obligated to go do, it's awesome. Father, we need a new roof. Can you start on that tonight? Yeah, I guess. Right? There's a goodness in that for me personally. I'm grateful that we have religious sisters. They've really had a positive effect in my life. And I thank them for it. I'm grateful to get to be in the classroom. I'm grateful to have sisters at our parish. My last one, I'm a little bit more embarrassed about. Before I got here, I unfortunately had a number of times where I had some negative experiences in confession. I could share stories because the people were not going to confession. They were just there in anger, and it was just a time to take a shot at Father, or they were there to vent grievances, or they were not there to receive God's mercy. That's why I could talk about it, because they weren't going to confession. I'm not breaking any seal. I'm not going to share the stories, but I could. They were not there for God's mercy. They were there so that I receive God's justice. And it was really painful. And it regularly happened. And so when I got here and found out that we heard confessions so frequently, I wasn't happy. I was not excited to hear confessions as often as we do. And it was common enough that I would actually purposely show up late for confessions here because I was scared. And I think because the parish has a great devotion to confession that I haven't had that experience. I'm grateful for that. When someone comes to confession here, they want God's mercy. And they soften a priest's heart towards it. I'm grateful for you all. Those of you who've gone to confession me, but just generally the spirit of confession in our parish. I'm grateful. To think that I'd be a priest who doesn't want to hear confession, doesn't want to reconcile people with God is embarrassing. And I'm sorry that was the case when I showed up. But because of you all, I have a different mindset on it now. My third cause for rejoice is for you. You've had a deep impact in my life and my priesthood. I obviously won't be here forever. I don't know when that will be, but you've made it better for future parishioners of mine because of your witness. Truly, from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you. I have great cause for rejoice today, for a variety of things. Right, we can focus on all the darkness of the world, right? That's what the gospel says. Right? People prefer darkness to light. There's a lot of darkness out there. And we can get bogged down by it. But we must choose the light. Yes, Jesus does die on the cross. He did die on the cross. We will have times of our own carrying of crosses, but that is not the end of the story. Because Jesus resurrected on the Sabbath. And he invites each and every one of us to be resurrected from our sin and resurrected from that darkness, brought forward out of darkness into light. And because of that, we have every reason to rejoice. Jesus tells us that for God so loved the world that he gave us his only Son. Today on Laetare Sunday, let us give thanks and praise to Almighty God for the great gift of his Son, who endures our suffering with us and invites us to the resurrection. I pray that you are having a powerful Lent this year. And because you're having such a powerful Lent, it will be a true day of rejoicing. Happy Laetare Sunday.